August 1990. A sliced window screen, an empty bed. An 8-year-old girl is dragged into the dark, brutalized, and left to die in a field of fire ants, with her throat slashed. Jennifer Schuett survived the attack, but what she almost didn't survive was the silence that followed. She gave them a description. She fought to be heard. So why did her file sit cold for 19 years? Tonight, we aren't just asking who did this. We're uncovering why it took 2 decades to find a monster. Who was hiding in plain sight? Imagine the world through the eyes of an 8-year-old. Your biggest fear should be missing the school bus or losing a favorite toy. Jennifer was exactly that child, happy, vibrant. A little girl who went to sleep believing she was perfectly safe in her own bed. Her mother was doing everything she could to keep that safety intact. She was a single mum, balancing work and parenting, just trying to build a good life for her daughter. It's a vulnerable position to be in. You want to trust people. You want to believe that when someone offers a hand, they mean well. That's how Dennis found his way in. He didn't break down the door with a weapon, at least not at first. He appeared as a solution, a mechanic, a familiar face, someone who seemed like a blessing to a struggling family. But Dennis wasn't a savior. He was a wolf, waiting for the right moment. And the tragedy here isn't just the betrayal. It's the fact that for 19 years, the man who knew exactly what happened in that bedroom was living his life, while Jennifer was fighting just to get hers back. On the night of August 10th, 1990, the silence was shattered. Someone sliced through the screen of Jennifer's bedroom window. Her mother was asleep in the next room. The house was quiet. But when Jennifer woke up, there was a man standing over her bed. He didn't drag her out screaming. Instead, he leaned in and told her he was an undercover cop. He lied to her, saying her mother was in danger, that she had been arrested, and that he was there to take Jennifer to safety. And because Jennifer was just a child, she believed him. He drove her to an isolated field. He assaulted her. He strangled her, and then he slashed her throat so deeply that it is a medical miracle she didn't bleed out in minutes. When he was done, he left her there, in the darkness, alone, dumped on top of a fire ant mound to die. But here is the detail that haunts this case. The man who did this had been in Jennifer's life before. He wasn't a stranger. And the reason it took 18 years to catch him? That is where this story gets even darker. Before we go any further, I need to say something. Stories like Jennifer's, they don't get told unless people like you make sure they're heard. Right now, only 3% of you watching are subscribed. That means 97% of you are okay with letting stories like this disappear into the algorithm. If you care about victims getting justice, if you think predators should be exposed, then hit that subscribe button right now. Because if you don't, YouTube will bury this video. And the next family going through this, they won't have a voice. If you won't subscribe, at least tell me why in the comments. I'm genuinely curious what would stop someone from supporting a channel that fights for victims like Jennifer. 12 hours. That is how long she lay there in the scorching Texas sun, unable to scream, covered in ants, waiting for someone, anyone, to notice she was still breathing. When a group of children playing nearby finally spotted her, they thought she was a doll thrown in the weeds, until she lifted her arm. Doctors called it a medical impossibility. The blade had severed her vocal cords and nerves, but it had missed her carotid artery and jugular vein by millimeters. She was alive, but she was silent. The damage was so severe that she physically could not speak a word. So, from her hospital bed, heavily sedated and bandaged, this 8-year-old girl did something extraordinary. She asked for a pen. She couldn't vocalize her pain, but she could write her truth. Note by note, she handed the detectives the clues they needed. She described the man's face. She described the specific smell of the interior of his car. She even remembered the brand of cigarettes sitting in the ashtray. And then, with a shaky hand, she wrote down the most important detail of all. She wrote a name. Dennis. Now here is where the investigation takes a turn that is hard to swallow. Jennifer's mother hadn't just met a random Dennis. About a year before the attack, she had dated a mechanic named Dennis Earl Bradford. He wasn't a mystery man. He had been inside their home. He knew the layout. He knew exactly which window led to Jennifer's bedroom. He knew their routines. And then the relationship ended and he drifted out of their lives. Or so they thought. So put yourself in the detective's shoes for a second. You have a surviving victim who is incredibly detailed. She writes down the name of her attacker, and that name matches an ex-boyfriend who fits the physical description perfectly. In any logical world, this is an open and shut case. The sirens should have been wailing within the hour, but that isn't what happened. In 1990, the forensic world was practically in the dark ages compared to today. There was no CODIS. There was no national database linking offenders across state lines with the click of a button. And here was the critical problem. Dennis Bradford had never been convicted of a felony. His genetic profile wasn't sitting in a file somewhere waiting to be flagged. The police had everything they needed in theory, a name, a description, and even biological evidence retrieved from the scene. But without a direct match or a confession, that evidence was just noise. They couldn't connect the DNA to the man without probable cause to test him specifically, and somehow the dots just didn't connect fast enough. And so, silence. The leads dried up. The detectives moved on to fresher cases. Months bled into years. Jennifer endured surgery after surgery to regain her voice. She went through adolescence carrying the physical and mental scars of that night. And through it all, she lived with a terrifying reality. The man who tried to end her life was still out there, walking free, driving past playgrounds, living a completely normal life while she fought for hers. You know what's terrifying? While Jennifer was waiting 18 years for justice, Dennis Bradford was free. He was going to work, maybe sitting next to someone's daughter on the bus, maybe befriending another single mother. And right now, there are thousands of cold cases just like this one. Predators walking free because their cases don't get attention. Because people scroll past. Because they don't subscribe to channels that expose the truth. If you're still watching but haven't subscribed, ask yourself why. What's stopping you from supporting content that gives victims a voice? Drop your reason in the comments. I'll wait. So how did Dennis Bradford end up in Jennifer's life in the first place? Let's go back. Dennis was in his late 20s when he met Jennifer's mother. He was charming, friendly, the kind of guy who seemed helpful. He offered to fix things around the house. He was good with kids, or so it seemed. But behind that smile was something else. Dennis had a history, a pattern. He had been accused of inappropriate behavior before, but nothing had stuck. He knew how to fly under the radar. He studied Jennifer. He learned her routines. He memorized where her bedroom was. He knew what time her mother went to sleep. And when the relationship with her mother ended, he didn't just disappear. He waited. He planned. And one night, he came back. But that was only the beginning of how long this nightmare would last. For 18 years, Jennifer lived with the weight of what happened to her. She endured reconstructive surgeries. She learned to speak again, slowly, painfully. And she never stopped hoping that one day someone would catch him. But as the years passed, hope started to fade. Then, in 2008, something changed. The FBI's Child Abduction Rapid Deployment Team decided to reopen Jennifer's case. They had new technology, new tools, and most importantly, they had DNA. They took the evidence from 1990, evidence that had been sitting in a box for nearly 2 decades, and ran it through the National DNA Database. And this time, they got a hit. This is the moment Jennifer had been waiting 18 years for. But here's what scares me. If this video doesn't get enough engagement, YouTube will stop showing it. And if that happens, the next Jennifer won't get her story told. The next Dennis won't get exposed. You've made it 14 minutes into this video. You clearly care. So why wouldn't you subscribe? Is it laziness? Forgetfulness? Or do you just not think it matters? Because I promise you, it matters. Every subscription tells YouTube that stories like this deserve to be seen, so if you haven't subscribed yet, do it now. And if you refuse to, tell me why in the comments. I'm genuinely asking, but what they discovered next would explain everything. Why it took so long, why Dennis was never caught earlier, and how close he came to getting away with it forever. Dennis Earl Bradford was living in Arkansas. He had a job, a life. He'd gotten married, and for 18 years, he thought he'd gotten away with it. When investigators showed up at his door, he didn't run. He didn't lawyer up immediately. He just sat down, and he confessed. He admitted everything. The kidnapping, the assault, the attempted murder. He said he'd thought about Jennifer over the years, and he knew, eventually, this day would come. So why did it take 18 years? It wasn't just about the technology, it was about timing. In 1990, Dennis Bradford had no prior felony convictions. His DNA wasn't sitting in a file waiting to be matched. And even though Jennifer gave his first name, it wasn't enough. Think about it. How many men named Dennis lived in that part of Texas in 1990? Hundreds? Thousands? Police couldn't just drag every Dennis in for a blood test. They didn't have the resources, they didn't have the manpower, and without more specific evidence, they didn't have the legal authority. It wasn't until Dennis was arrested for another crime years later, something completely unrelated, that his DNA was finally entered into the national system. And that is when the match was made. Jennifer had been waiting. The system had failed her for nearly 2 decades. But finally, she had her answer. Dennis Bradford took the coward's way out. He denied Jennifer her day in court. He denied her the closure she deserved. And you know what the worst part is? There are people watching this video right now who feel bad for Jennifer, but still won't subscribe. They'll watch her suffer. They'll feel outraged, and then they'll scroll to the next video without doing the one thing that ensures more stories like hers get told. If that's you, if you're still here and haven't subscribed, I genuinely want to know why. Comment below. Tell me what's holding you back, because from where I'm standing, there's no good reason. Jennifer fought for 18 years. The least you can do is click a button. But Jennifer refused to let him have the last word. On the 20th anniversary of her abduction, she travelled to Dennis Bradford's grave, and she stood over the ground where he was buried, and she read her victim impact statement out loud. She told him everything. She told him how he had stolen her childhood, her voice, her sense of safety. But she also told him how she had survived, how she had rebuilt her life, how she had become a mother. Something doctors said would be nearly impossible because of the trauma her body endured. Jennifer Schuett didn't just survive. She thrived. She became an advocate, a speaker, a voice for children who couldn't speak for themselves. She took the scars on her neck and wore them not as a mark of shame, but as a badge of honor, a symbol of the warrior she had to become. But Jennifer's story forces us to look at the uncomfortable truth. It forces us to ask, how many other cardboard boxes are sitting on dusty shelves in evidence rooms right now? How many other samples are waiting for technology to catch up? How many predators are walking around today living normal lives because the system isn't fast enough? Because the resources aren't there? Because a file got misplaced or a lead wasn't followed? Jennifer waited 18 years. 18 years of looking over her shoulder. 18 years of silence. But the tragedy is that she is one of the lucky ones. Some victims never get answers. Some go to their graves without ever knowing who hurt them. And that is why her story matters. It isn't just a survival story. It is a wake-up call. It is proof that we cannot give up on the cold files, that we cannot stop testing the evidence, that justice, even when it is delayed, even when it takes a lifetime, still matters. We're almost at the end, and I need to be honest with you. If you've made it this far and still haven't subscribed, I don't understand you. You just spent 27 minutes learning about an 8-year-old girl who was tortured, left for dead, and had to wait 18 years for justice. You clearly care. So why wouldn't you subscribe to a channel that tells these stories? Is it because you think your one subscription doesn't matter? Because I promise you, it does. Every single subscriber helps YouTube push this content to more people. Every subscription means another victim's story gets told. So here is my challenge. Subscribe right now. Prove that you care about more than just entertainment. Prove that you believe victims like Jennifer deserve a platform. And if you won't, drop a comment and tell me why. Because honestly, I can't think of a single good reason. Today, Jennifer Schuett uses her voice, the very voice he tried to silence forever, to help others. She speaks at schools, at conferences, anywhere someone will listen. Because she knows what it is like to wait in the dark, to wonder if the world has forgotten you, to hope that someone, somewhere, is still fighting for you. Dennis Bradford is gone, but Jennifer is still here. And that is the most powerful form of justice there is. If you or someone you know has experienced abuse, please reach out. You are not alone, and your story matters.